Hey there, community bankers. Welcome back to the Correspondent podcast from Independent Correspondent Bankers Bank. I'm your host, Madison Caplinger, Marketing Specialist for ICBB. Women have made great strides in banking, business, and financial literacy over the past several decades. However, pronounced disparities still persist in all of these areas. I talked to Britney Campbell, Senior Vice President of Marketing and Public Relations at Legends Bank in the Nashville area and founder of Her Bank, a bank brand by women for women. Britney and her team are dedicated to empowering women with the financial tools and knowledge they need to succeed, both personally and as entrepreneurs. Please welcome Britney to the podcast. Hey there, community bankers. I am here with Britney Campbell, the founder of Her Bank in the Nashville area in Tennessee. How are you doing today, Britney?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. So for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional background.
Yeah, so I've actually been in banking for 25 years. Although I am the founder and co-creator of a brand called Her Bank, which launched in May of 2021, I am the senior vice president of marketing and public relations for Legends Bank, which is a community bank here in the Middle Tennessee area. And we established in 1998 and started working there right after high school. So I've done a little bit of everything leading up to my marketing career. So when I started at the bank while I was in college. So I kind of like to say I did some of the front line, started a banking career through like being the float person branch to branch. I've done the teller, frontline, new accounts, receptionist. I was a chief of paper shredding when it was necessary at times. But then once I got through college and graduated with my marketing degree, the bank was growing, was able to really step in at that point while we were growing our footprint and start taking my education and using it towards my career, which was really exciting. And so I think for me in that time between kind of bridging the gap between then and now is just really being passionate about being intentional and utilizing creativity with emotional intelligence to really bridge that gap between strategy and humanity, because that's really what I love being a part of as far as how we utilize marketing for being more purposeful with what we do in order to drive that brand and experience initiative through our bank.
Yeah, I love that. I didn't mention your other title at first, but it's always good to talk to a fellow bank marketer and a fellow CFMP too,
Yeah.
um, which is cool. Yeah, I think every bank marketer should be able to, community bank marketer especially, should be able to resonate with what you just said. But speaking of, purpose and intentionality, tell us about founding Her Bank in 2021. So how did that idea come about, and what was the process like of getting that brand up and off the ground?
Yeah, I'll try to keep this really succinct, but really it kind of landed in our laps through COVID. And I had really gone through a shift in my own life to move away from my hometown of Clarksville, Tennessee, where our bank is headquartered, to Nashville, and just really seeking community as a bank marketer and as a woman, just kind of getting my new life started there. I ran across a women's co-working space that got me connected with some really powerful women in the business space, and that really was a catalyst to figure out how Legends Bank could be a better resource for these women entrepreneurs who were in a really interesting space around pivoting their business during a pandemic, not being able to really reach their banker or not even having a relationship with a banker. But really, how do we come in and plug into such an uncertain time and be not only a resource, but also figure out how do we become part of this women supporting women in an environment where I feel like women in finance and all of those, maybe the insecurities and the fear and all of the things that we kind of talk about related to women and money, were really at the forefront to work with women who had been laid off of their jobs and looking to see what was next for them, whether that was starting a new business or trying to figure out how they were going to manage their finances, if they were like a single woman household, or if they were also contributing to their family dynamics financially. So it was just a really interesting time, and that was really inspirational for me to figure out how this concept could really be something unique for us as a bank, and also unique concept for women in general, to have something that was focused on women, that spoke to women differently, and really just had a slightly different model, taking everything we knew about how we wanted to service customers from a Legends Bank standpoint, and really be able to model that specifically for women through this brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard you tell that story before, but you alluded to a few things specific to women and their financial experience and their banking experience. Um, so, where do you see women falling through the cracks of a traditional banking experience, and how does her bank kind of show up differently for these women?
Well, I think a few things. Number one, I just want to say I think, it kind of hits a spot for me when I hear that women are underserved. I think for a lot of times we're very much underestimated, and so I think that what we were really trying to do with this brand was recognize the maybe barriers to success, or how do we really confront the things that we hear about women and money. And a lot of that's generational, to be honest. I'm actually reading a book now called Give Her Credit, because it's Women's History Month, and just really kind of unpacking the women that started the first bank in Denver and really the challenges that they faced. And generationally, we just really haven't had the access. So you look at your mom, you look at your grandmother, you look at that just one step away. We are really have more access and more resources today. We have the great wealth transfer that's coming, but because of that generational aspect of it, where we were taught not to really talk about money, we were really taught to save. We were really taught that somebody else, typically a man, was going to be the person that was going to be the provider, was going to be the financial backbone. And that's just not the case. Modern women today are not necessarily experiencing those things. Women are waiting to get married. Um, you have a higher rate of divorce at certain ages, and it's just the reality. Women are widowed and where they're having to take over finances. So there's just a lot of things that women face, where those generational gaps, maybe in education, confidence, whatever they may be some barriers. But I do think there's been some great strides, especially recently, to help to bridge that gap. But we still got some work to do.
Absolutely. I remember having the thought that, women didn't even have access to their own credit until
70s.
1970. Yeah, sometime in the 70s. And I remember thinking, like, both of my grandmothers would have been adult women at this
Hmm.
point before they
Hmm.
were, given access to credit. And that's really
Hmm.
crazy to talk about. So those gaps are definitely still there. And one of the things that you mentioned is a gap in confidence. And that's backed
Hmm.
up by, a lot of research, because there are studies that show that women often feel less confident in financial decision making than men. So what do you think are the key factors contributing to that financial literacy gap?
Uh, I mean, I think one is you don't see a lot of women traditionally in the financial space. So you look at your financial advisors, you look at women in banking, which is changing. I want to be clear about that too, because I do see it changing. But I do think that you still have all of those industries that support our financial landscape are typically dominated by men. So just in that in general, the conversation's just different. And I think when women feel like they have a safe space to connect and build a relationship, and can have the conversations to where they feel like they're on equal footing, and they're not being talked down to, or they're not being talked at. um, I think that's a major bridge to the positive changes towards women having more confidence. And I do think the add of social media and just having maybe even AI to a degree to be able to, in your own time, be able to help educate yourself or work through some of the confidence barriers that may be there. I do think that there's some shifts related to technology and just, where you can access certain information and get more education and feel better about some of the decisions that you're making. But, bringing that back into banking, we're still such a relationship people business, even though, we learned in the very beginning of establishing this brand that women want a person, but they're not really going to have the in branch experience. So, how do you utilize the digital tools and utilize all the things that they really want to make their banking easier, where they don't have to come into the bank, but still keep that relationship aspect of it to be able to give them that level of experience and know that they have someone that they can trust to help them navigate whatever financial situation they may be in at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation that's happening across banking. How do we utilize the digital tools, but also maintain, the relational um, aspect that we pride ourselves on as
Hmm.
community bankers. And I think you really kind of answered my next question. I was wondering, how banks can do a better job of engaging and educating women about their financial management, but it sounds like representation is a big piece of that. Just having, other women there that can kind of, meet them where they are and not seem intimidating, not talk down to them, and someone that they feel like they can connect with.
Yeah, and I think it's even deeper than that because I do think, well, I'm a woman. I'm only going to speak from my own experience, but we're complex humans. And we just, in my experience growing up in banking, there were things when I first started my career that I could not have had and met women in conversations that we're having today. I think women having life experience and being able to meet them with compassion and having a level of empathy is also a level of it because if you're dealing with somebody that's lost a spouse, you're dealing with someone that's in the trenches of a divorce or going through some major life change, how are you able to really have hard conversations and hold space for someone while they're trying to navigate their finances as well? And I've been in positions like that. So have some of my peers. I think when we were working through what we wanted the Herbank experience to be, we really wanted not only experts in their lane of lending or business banking, whatever, also wanted to ensure that those qualities of empathy, compassion, having some life experiences where you're not just talking about products and services, you're really holistically talking about someone's financial future and how helping them through a process. And some of that is a psychological and emotional process more than it is a transactional one.
Absolutely. I think what you just said, I think every community banker needs to hear that, whether they're thinking about, serving women or, their own community or even other, underbanked and, marginalized communities, meeting people with empathy and understanding. It's not always a logical process. Sometimes it's psychological. I think that's really, really important
Mhm.
important to this conversation as well. And so a lot of what I've asked about so far has been kind of the personal banking side in regards to her bank and in regards to banking women. But I know the other side that her bank caters to is supporting women entrepreneurs. And before I started here, I was one. I was a freelance marketer for a little while, so I there's some of those challenges that I can understand, but what are some of the biggest financial hurdles that women entrepreneurs face today?
Yeah, well, Herbank really started out as a brand to support women business owners. I would say working with businesses is sort of our love language anyway. So it was really a natural fit to carry that over through this brand because really a lot of women are overqualified and they're underfunded. And so what I've witnessed, I have a lot of friends who are women business owners that, you talk about your personal life and your professional life. And a lot of times that's really blurred, right? We are all encompassing. And so we're doing it all. And, there are a lot of challenges with women getting funding, whatever means that looks like from finance, just traditional financing through a bank. Those are hurdles that we're still discussing as a team because, startup aspects of things are a little challenging and complex, especially if you're starting out and you don't really have a lot of capital to inject for yourself. um, really trying to help women beyond the creative aspect of starting a business. You have a lot of women that have amazing concepts, but what they lack is maybe the black and white pieces, the financial pieces, some of the things that are really needed in order to take them to that next level. So, like, financial education, that kind of thing that is going to be there as other resources beyond just us checking those typical banker boxes for businesses, and being able to help women just beyond, like I said, that whole transactional aspects, because you have them fill out the application, you have a little bit of a conversation. So what happens if you can't fund them? What's that next thing? Are you just going to let them, go about their merry way, check with other resources, give up on their dream? Or do we, offer something else in addition to that to help them with, it's a no today, but how could we move them towards a yes or guide them through that next piece of it? Because that no can be so detrimental. And so I think that's one of those things that we're still having conversations about, trying to figure out through, the process of doing really, and just kind of being curious about how do we come in for those challenges that a lot of women entrepreneurs are facing to be able to be a solution to that. It's definitely not perfect at this stage, but my understanding is we are not alone when talking to other community banks related to some of this. So, it's really for us just really understanding women and the challenges that they're facing through some of those conversations to figure out how we as an industry and as this brand are able to come up with solutions that will help, um, down the road.
Yeah, and it takes me back to what you said about the importance of relationship-based banking and supporting women-owned businesses when they kind of need that, hand up in a way that, maybe men don't. I think the relationship is key in being able to kind of guide them toward getting to where they want to be.
Yep, for sure.
So, have you noticed differences in how women approach business financing compared to their male counterparts? Because I'm thinking back to when, I was a freelancer, and my plan at that time was to just, keep taking that bigger and bigger, but it never really occurred to me to, seek out a loan from a bank. So I'm wondering if, women are more on average, prone to, not engage with the financial system and try to,
Like
self-fund,
bootstrap it.
whereas yeah, whereas men are maybe have a little bit more of a risk appetite there.
That's all the things. I think, as women, we tend to have a little bit more of the perfectionist demons, where we kind of fight ourselves, can be less risk averse. We overthink, we want to make sure we get it right. Um, Oftentimes, if you have confidence issues related to even just talking about money or just not feeling like you have the resources, the last thing you want to do is set yourself up for rejection, or you want to set yourself up to feel like you may be in a situation to feel less than. Or I just say, I don't want to be put in a situation where somebody's going to make me feel stupid. So I need to know all the things. I need to have all the things and all of this before I even have the conversation. When I encourage just to find a trusted person to have the conversation so you can start building, getting the building blocks for whatever it is that you're trying to get to on especially on the funding side, because so much of that negativity that you hear from like their experiences trying to get financing is because it's a reactive process than a proactive one where they get enough information to have the right conversations in a time where they can get themselves to that yes. And so that can kind of create some challenges and also delay a process as well. And I think for that, you know, women as a whole don't just want funding, they also want a level of clarity. I think women ask a lot of questions. I think that they care deeply about what they're doing and the impacts that they're going to make with like their money. And men just kind of go after it. They ask for what they need. Even if it doesn't make sense, a lot of times they just have that confidence just to go in there and figure it out, where I think sometimes women will take a little bit more time and try to nurture a concept or nurture that part of it, or just have that procrastination because they have fear or some insecurity that's keeping them from that next step.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me, how much that, that lack of confidence, that procrastination, waiting, self-doubt can really hold us back,
Mhm.
spread over the whole population. So, I'm curious if you have any, success stories of women entrepreneurs who have like thrived with the help of her bank, or if you have any success stories like that to share.
Yes. We have several, and I think from very simple, when I just talk about just little things that can make a world of a difference, is, having someone reach out to me that said, I've got some credit card debt. I'm really trying to get a handle on my finances for a lot of life reasons. And um, really, in the scheme of things, what she thought was very shameful, detrimental, had put off a conversation for, I want to say, months to years, where she had just been paying a certain way. She had just been navigating her finances a certain way. And within a 15 to 30-minute phone call and just kind of discussing and giving her some relief that, like, your situation is not unmanageable. This is actually a very simple, you know, this is a very simple solution. We've got easy ways for you to address what you're trying to accomplish, and just really being able to hear her out and meet her where she's at kind of emotionally, and give her that relief. Like, she still talks about that one conversation today with a couple of people on our team about how, just had she had the conversation when she first started having the fear, she would have already had her situation taken care of. So just, as again reiterating, sometimes simplest things of just having the conversation can move you leaps and bounds for taking action and just getting to that next step. Um, and because launched that brand in 2021, kind of talking about the pivoting and people women being let off from their jobs and having to figure out how they were going to, what next step they had. We've had a few businesses that really walked lockstep with us. So they launched their business and started their banking relationship with us at the same time. So really being able to watch their businesses grow, and attributing some of their success or the ease of how they're managing their finances for what we've been able to provide them is like beyond rewarding. Just to kind of see, their success story and feeling like you just play one little part in what they've been able to accomplish over that period of time.
That's so amazing. And there are things that you've said over the course of this conversation that I think every community banker could take and apply to every community, about meeting people
Mhm.
where they are and leading with empathy. I think we all need that. But we've also, talked a lot about the challenges that women face in, attaining banking relationships for personal and, business banking. So, how do you think community banks can take inspiration from her bank and implement similar initiatives in their own communities to serve women in their own markets?
I think you have to kind of start with curiosity and listening. Like, what is happening in your community and like who are those groups, whether it's women or other niche groups that may be underserved or maybe kind of missed and not had a level of engagement from their community banks. We it was an easy bridge to gap for us because we're women and we're in a space where um I think a global pandemic brought a lot of things to the surface that may not have been exposed as much as it was prior to that. So I definitely think just being able to look in your own communities to find places that other banks aren't plugging in that you could really be a resource to, especially community banks where you have a lot of your bankers who are very much involved out there between nonprofits and other, organizations to, listen in to what they're involved in and where your bank can better serve you know, as a group or a community. So I think just between education, empowerment, connect, and connection, those three things right there, just being able to do things that are a little outside the box and leaning into being unique and not like everybody else, sets you already apart. Everybody wants to be different, but I think you have to look within your own bank and what makes you guys special as well and try to marry the two. And I think that's just kind of where the magic happens. It's between the people and a little bit of creativity, a lot of passion somehow makes that work.
Now, that is amazing advice to end on. And every community bank marketer said amen. Thank you so much, Brittany, for joining us on the podcast and for sharing these fantastic insights about her bank and banking for women. And I hope that our audience of community banks can really pull something from this podcast to take back to their own banks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for listening to the Correspondent podcast from Independent Correspondent Bankers Bank. We hope you've heard something that you can take back to your community bank. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review, or on Spotify, turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. See you next time, community bankers.